The fire had gone cold before she woke up. That was the first thing Nell noticed. Not the sound of the horses outside, not the shadow moving past the window. Just the cold. The kind that settles into the floor planks and doesn't leave until April. She'd let the fire die again. She'd been doing that more and more since her father passed, letting things go without meaning to, like the fraying rope on the well and the hinge on the smokehouse door that she kept meaning to fix and never did. She swung her legs off the cot and reached for her boots. Through the single window above the dry sink, the sky was the color of a bruise. Not quite dark, not quite morning. The mountains behind the property were invisible in the haze, just shapes she knew were there from memory. She heard the second horse then, 2 horses, 2 riders. Coming up the south trail, the one that didn't lead anywhere except here. Nell stood very still in the middle of the room and counted her breaths the way her father had taught her when she was small and afraid of thunder. 1, 2, 3. Her rifle was by the door. Her shotgun was on the hook above the stove. She looked at the shotgun first, then at the door, then back at the shotgun. She chose the rifle. By the time the knock came, if you could call it a knock, it was more like a fist that didn't much care what was on the other side of the door. She was standing with her back against the far wall, the rifle up and level. "Go away," she said. Her voice came out steadier than she expected. A pause, then a voice she recognized, greasy and slow, the kind of voice that thinks it already won. "Now that ain't a friendly way to greet neighbors, Miss Nell." Harlan Rook, she should have known. He'd been circling her father's property for 2 years like a dog waiting for the owner to fall down. Her father hadn't fallen down, but he was gone now, 3 weeks in the ground up on the ridge under the pine she'd planted herself at 7 years old, and Harlan Rook had apparently decided that was long enough to wait. "This is private land," she said. "You know that land's only private if somebody's got the strength to hold it." Another pause, shorter this time. "You got 2 men out here, Miss Nell, and I'm being civil about it. Wouldn't you say I'm being civil, Dex? Someone on the porch." Dex, she assumed, made a sound that might have been agreement. Nell moved to her left, keeping the rifle up, putting the heavy oak table between herself and the door. Her mind was running ahead of her, calculating. 2 men she knew of, possibly a third around back. The smokehouse door was broken. The back window didn't latch. She'd known for months that this property had too many ways in and not enough ways to stop what came through them. She'd told herself she'd fix it. She'd told herself a lot of things. "My father left this land to me legal," she said. "I've got the papers." Harlan Rook made a sound like a laugh that didn't quite make it all the way. "Your daddy also left you out here alone. That's the real problem, isn't it?" It wasn't a question. She heard the latch lift. She'd been meaning to fix that too. The latch was loose in its housing, had been for months, only needed a good lift to clear the catch. Her father had always meant to replace the whole mechanism. They'd talked about it. They'd talked about so many things. The door opened. Harlan Rook was a big man made bigger by the sheepskin coat he wore year-round, winter and summer alike, as though the coat itself was part of the threat. Behind him stood a younger one she didn't know, Dex, presumably, lean and watchful with his thumbs hooked into his belt. Nell kept the rifle up. "That's real pretty," Harlan said, nodding at the rifle. "You know how to use it?" "My father taught me. Your father." He said it like a punchline to a joke he hadn't bothered telling yet. He took 1 step into the room and stopped, looking around at the cold hearth, the empty water pail, the single cot in the corner. "Doesn't look like he taught you much about keeping a place. Don't." Her finger moved to the trigger guard. "Don't take another step." He took another step. She fired, not at him, to the left of him, close enough that the shot took a chunk out of the door frame and filled the room with smoke and the sound of something ending. Harlan Rook flinched. Dex scrambled back onto the porch and hit the railing with enough force that she heard it crack. For 3 seconds, nobody moved. Then Harlan's eyes came back to her, and the civility was gone. "You're going to regret that," he said quietly. Nell was already reloading. Her hands were shaking. She could feel them shaking, but she kept her eyes up, kept her body in front of what she was doing, because she knew if she looked down she'd lose the upper hand, and the upper hand was the only thing between her and whatever Harlan Rook had decided to do next. "Get out of my house," she said. He didn't move. He was watching her the way a man watches something he's decided to take. Patient, certain. "There's a third way this goes," he said. "You come out of this with something. Sell me the property at a fair price, take the money, go somewhere. Start over. You're young enough." His eyes moved around the room again, dismissive and slow. "This place is already half dead anyway. The only thing that's leaving this property is you." Dex came back to the door. Slower now, more careful. He was holding a length of rope, and trying to look like that was nothing unusual. Nell felt the cold then, the real cold, the kind that has nothing to do with temperature. She had one shot in the rifle. She had the shotgun above the stove, but the stove was behind Harlan now. If she moved for it, she'd have to go through him. If she stayed where she was, Dex would be on her left and Harlan in front, and she had one shot, and no good options. She'd known for weeks she was running out of time. She'd looked at the land and thought, "This is mine." She'd looked at the mountains and thought, "My father is buried up there." She hadn't let herself think past those two things, because thinking past them led somewhere she wasn't ready to go. She was there now. "Last chance," Harlan said. The back window exploded inward, not from outside. Something had struck it, a branch maybe, or a stone, but the sound ripped through the moment like a gunshot, and Harlan spun toward it, and in that half-second Nell moved. She went for the stove. She got her hand on the shotgun just as Harlan recovered himself and turned back around, and for one suspended moment they were both perfectly still, Nell with the shotguns leveled at his chest and Harlan with his hand halfway to the pistol on his hip. "Don't," she said. He didn't, in the silence after. The particular silence that happens when things could have gone one way and didn't. She became aware of something outside. A sound, not the horses, something heavier and more deliberate, a footfall on the porch boards that was different from the way Dex moved, different from the way any man she'd ever known moved, like the mountain itself, deciding to take a step. Harlan heard it too. She watched his eyes shift toward the door. The figure that appeared in the doorway was tall enough that he had to angle his head slightly coming through. He wore a canvas coat the color of bark, and he was carrying something over one shoulder that she didn't look at right away because she was still watching Harlan's face. She learned more from Harlan's face in the next 3 seconds than she'd learned from anything in 3 weeks of trying to hold this property together. Harlan Rook was afraid. The man in the doorway looked at Harlan first, then at Dex on the porch, then at Nell. His eyes were grey, or something close to grey. He didn't say anything immediately. He just stood there like a door that had decided to become a wall. "These men bothering you?" he asked, finally. His voice was lower than she expected, unhurried, the way a river is unhurried. Nell kept the shotgun on Harlan. They were just leaving. The man in the doorway, she didn't know his name yet. She wouldn't learn it for another 2 hours. Set down what he'd been carrying, a brace of rabbits. He'd been hunting. He'd come down from somewhere up the ridge and walked into this, and was now standing in her doorway like it was the most natural thing in the world. He looked at Harlan again. "You heard her." Harlan Rook looked at the shotgun. He looked at the man in the doorway. He did the arithmetic, and whatever he came up with, he didn't like it, but he was smart enough to accept it. He took a step back toward the porch. Then another. "This isn't finished," he said to Nell. "It is for tonight," the man in the doorway said. Not loud, not threatening, just fact. Harlan left. Dex scrambled after him. She listened to the horses until she couldn't hear them anymore, and then she stood in the cold room, with the shotgun still in her hands, and her heart hammering so hard she could feel it in her back teeth. She became aware, slowly that her hands were shaking badly now. She set the shotgun down on the table. "You all right?" the man asked. He hadn't moved from the doorway. "I would have been fine," she said. It came out sharper than she meant it. He nodded once, like that was a reasonable thing to say, and didn't argue it. She liked that, though she didn't know it yet. "Your door latch is broken," he said. "I know. I can fix it." He looked at the frame where her shot had taken out the wood. "That too, if you want." She looked at him then, really looked. He was older than she'd initially thought. Or not older, exactly, but the kind of man who looks like he has been places and done things, and has stopped pretending any of it was simple and... He had a beard that hadn't been touched in some months, and hands that looked like they'd spent their lives being useful. He didn't look at her the way Harlan Rook looked at things, like they were his already or could be with the right kind of pressure. He looked at her the way you look at weather, present, respectful. "Who are you?" she asked. "Raylan," he said. "I've got a camp up past the second ridge. Been there since September." "Doing what?" "Hunting, trapping, same as most." He looked at the broken window. "Same as anyone who wants to be left alone." She thought about that for a moment. The fire was still out. The room was cold and the door hung open, and she had nothing to offer a person who'd just walked in on all of this, and handled it like he handled it. "I'm Nell," she said. "I know. Your father used to let me take water from the south well when I passed through." She hadn't known that. She found, unexpectedly, that it made her want to cry, which she refused to do in front of this stranger who had fixed nothing yet and was still standing in her doorway. Her father had always done small things like that. Quiet kindnesses she only found out about later. "He died," she said. The word landed harder than she expected it to. "I know," Raylan said again. "I'm sorry." He said it the way people rarely mean it, not as a social ritual, not as a thing to say, but like the words actually came from somewhere inside him and cost something to give. She didn't know how to measure that, not yet. She stored it away to think about later. "You can fix the latch," she said finally, "if you want." He nodded. He pulled the door shut behind him. Carefully, fitting it into the frame just right, despite the broken mechanism, and went out to where he'd set down the rabbits, and she stood in the cold room alone for a moment and breathed. He fixed the latch that afternoon. He didn't ask for anything for it. He had his own tools, worn to the shape of his hands, and he worked quietly and efficiently, without commentary, the way people work when they've spent a long time doing things alone. She watched him from across the room for a while, then moved to the hearth and built a fire, because she had to do something with her hands. When he was done, he tested the latch 3 times. Satisfied, he stepped back. "The back window," she said, before she'd fully decided to say it. "The latch on that doesn't hold either." He looked at her. "I've got a list," she admitted, "of things that need fixing. It's a long list." He picked up his tools. "I'm not going anywhere today," he said. That was how it started. He didn't stay. That was the first thing she needed to understand, and she understood it. He came down from the ridge when he came down. And sometimes that was 2 days in a row, and sometimes it was a week apart. And he never announced himself, just appeared at the tree line the way the deer did, present and unhurried. He fixed the window latch. He replaced 2 rotted boards on the porch. He looked at the well rope without her asking and replaced that too, leaving the old rope coiled neatly on the post like a courtesy note. He never came inside unless she invited him. She started to think about that. About what it meant for a person to understand without being told where the line was. Harlan Rook came back, not in person. He sent word through the man who ran the dry goods store in Dalton, which was the nearest town, 12 miles by the lower road. The word was this: he was willing to wait. He was patient. The offer stood. Nell read the message twice, and then used it to start the fire. She told Raylan about it on a Tuesday, 2 weeks after the night he'd walked into her doorway. He was replacing the hinge on the smokehouse door, the one she'd been meaning to fix for months. And she came and stood nearby and told him what Harlan had said. She was aware, as she told him, that she wasn't asking for help. She was just talking out loud to another person who happened to be nearby, which was something she hadn't done in a very long time. Raylan finished seating the hinge before he spoke. "Raylan, he'll try something when the weather turns," he said. "Before the snow hits and makes things complicated, he'll want it settled before winter. How long do I have?" He looked at the sky the way he did sometimes, reading it. 3 weeks, maybe 4. That's not long." "No," he agreed. She looked at the mountains, at the ridge where her father was buried, at the pines her father had planted before she was born, at the fences her grandfather had built, running crooked in the way of things built by hand, imperfect and permanent. "I'm not selling," she said. Not to Raylan. It was more like she was telling the land itself. "I know," he said, and went back to the hinge. She thought about that later, how he'd said it, without surprise, without argument, without the particular kind of indulgence men sometimes offer to women who made inconvenient decisions. He'd said it the way you acknowledge a fact of geography. She started leaving coffee out. Not offering it, exactly. She just started making enough for 2 in the morning and leaving the second cup near where he usually worked. He started drinking it. That was how they negotiated, the two of them, in small, careful increments. Like people who have both been burned by moving too fast toward warmth. He told her about himself in pieces. He'd been a lawman once. A long time ago in a place she'd never been. He'd given it up, or it had given him up. He was vague about which, and she didn't push. He had a sister somewhere. He'd had a partner who didn't survive a situation that wasn't his fault, but that he carried anyway, the way certain people carry things, quietly and forever. She told him about her father, about growing up on this land, learning to shoot at 8, learning to read weather and track deer, and set a snare, about the way her father had treated the land like a thing that deserved respect, not just use. About how she'd thought, when she was young, that people like her father were common, and how she'd spent her whole adult life learning they were not. The first snow came earlier than Raylan had predicted. It came overnight, quiet and without announcement, and when Nell opened the door in the morning, the world was white and still and different. She stood on the porch and breathed it in. Fresh snow always smelled like possibility to her. She heard him before she saw him. The particular way he moved through underbrush, heavier than a deer, more careful than most men. He came out of the tree line carrying firewood, a full load, enough for 3 days at least. She watched him cross the yard. There was something about a person who does the thing without being asked. Something that lands differently than any number of promises. She'd had people, very few people, just do the thing. "I didn't know you were coming today," she said. "Snow changes the plan," he said. "Wanted to make sure you had wood." She stepped back to let him onto the porch. He stacked the wood in the shelter beside the door, methodical and neat, all the pieces fitting together, like he was building something meant to last. She thought about what Harlan had said. This place is already half dead. She thought about how wrong he was, not about the condition of it, which was admittedly rough, but about what half-dead meant, and where it could go from there. Half-dead and dead weren't the same thing. Half-dead was just winter. "He's going to come soon," she said. Raylan didn't stop stacking. "Yes, more than 2 men this time." "Probably." She leaned against the doorframe and looked at him. "Why are you here, Raylan? Really?" She'd wanted to ask it for weeks. "You don't know me. You didn't know my father well. You don't owe me anything." He set the last piece of wood in place, stood up, looked at her with those grey eyes that were very hard to read, and also, she'd learned, very honest. He was the kind of man whose face doesn't perform things, which meant when it did show something you knew, it was real. "Because it's right," he said, "and because I know what it is to be the only thing standing between something that should exist and the people who want to take it." She held that for a moment. "That's it?" she asked. "That's enough," he said. And then, quieter. It should have been enough before. In the place I came from, it wasn't. He looked at the mountains. I'm trying to do things differently now. She didn't have anything to say to that. She went inside and he followed, because she held the door, and they sat by the fire with coffee and didn't say much else, and it was, she realized, one of the better evenings she'd had in a very long time. Harlan came on a Thursday, 4 men. She counted them from the window. Harlan, Dex, and 2 others she hadn't seen before. One with a rifle across his saddle that he wasn't pretending to hide. They came up the south trail in the mid-morning when the light was flat and shadowless, and she'd been splitting wood in the yard, and so she had only about 30 seconds from the time she saw them to the time they reached the gate. She went inside, got the rifle, got the shotgun, set the shotgun by the door and took the rifle to the window. Her heart wasn't hammering this time. She noticed that, distantly. The fear was there. It would be stupid not to have it, but it wasn't running the room anymore. She'd had 3 weeks of doing things and being ready and having good reasons to keep going, and that, it turned out, made a difference. Harlan Rook dismounted at the gate. He looked at the property the way he always looked at it, like it was already his. Last chance, he called out. He'd always liked that phrase. The shot came from the tree line. Not a kill shot. Not aimed at Harlan. Not aimed at any of them. Just a single crack that split the morning air and sent one of the horses sideways and told everyone present that there was a rifle in those trees, held by someone who knew what they were doing. Harlan went very still. The trees didn't move. There was no second shot. Just the echo of the first one fading out over the ridge. One of the men Nell didn't recognize said, quietly, "Harlan." Harlan was still looking at the tree line. Nell opened the door. She stood on the porch with the rifle at her side. Not raised, not hidden, just present. The cold morning air came in around her, and she stood in it the way she'd learned to stand in things, straight and without apology. "My father built this," she said. "His father helped him. You're not going to take it." Harlan Rook looked at the tree line, then at Nell, then at the tree line again. "Who's up there?" he asked. "A friend," she said. The word was new in her mouth. She liked the weight of it. Harlan did the arithmetic again, same as he'd done the first night, and came to the same conclusion. He was smart enough to know when the ground had shifted. He was not, to his credit, the kind of man who needed to be told the same thing 3 times. He remounted. He said nothing else. The 4 of them went back down the south trail the way they'd come, and Nell stood on the porch and watched until they were gone. It was a long time before she heard Raylan come out of the trees. He moved, the same way he always moved, unhurried, like he had nowhere else to be. He came across the yard with the rifle on his shoulder and stopped at the bottom of the porch steps. "You knew he was coming," she said. "Figured it was about time." She thought about the week before, how she'd woken up in the night and heard something in the yard and gone to the window and seen only darkness and told herself it was deer. She thought about how the wood pile had been getting mysteriously larger. She thought about small, quiet things done without announcement. "How long were you up there?" she asked. "Since before dawn." She looked at him. He was cold. She could see it in the way he held himself, but he wasn't complaining about it, wasn't mentioning it, was just standing there with the rifle on his shoulder and a look on his face that wasn't quite anything she could name. "Come inside," she said. "I'll make breakfast." He came up the steps. He was almost past her when she said it to the yard, to the mountains, to the trail where Harlan Rook's horses had kicked up dust that was still settling. "I don't think he'll come back." Raylan paused at the door. She felt him there behind her, close enough that she was aware of the warmth of him, even in the cold morning air. "No," he said. "I don't think so either." She turned around and looked at him. Really looked, the way she'd been learning to look at things again, fully and without flinching. The mountains behind him, the sky going pale blue above the ridge, the property her grandfather had staked out with iron posts and conviction, that her father had tended with patience and love, that she had held on to with a stubbornness that sometimes felt like the only thing she had. "I want you to stay," she said. "Not," she caught herself, "not because I can't manage. I can manage." "I know you can," he said, simply, without argument, "but I don't want to do it alone anymore." She'd been alone for 3 years. She'd been good at it, mostly. Good at it the way you're good at things you have no choice about. "There's room. The property's big enough. There's a whole cabin on the north side my father built for. It doesn't matter what he built it for. It's empty. You could, if you wanted to." She stopped, looked at him. "Is there something keeping you up on that ridge?" He thought it genuinely, the way he did things, not performing consideration, actually having it. "No," he said. "Then stay." He looked at the mountains for a moment, then back at her. Something moved across his face, not quite a smile, but near one. The kind of thing you save up without meaning to. "All right," he said. She held the door. He went inside. The fire was going and the coffee was almost ready, and outside the mountains stood the same as they always had, indifferent and permanent, and full of weather as she hadn't learned yet. But the latch worked. The porch boards held. The wood pile was stacked high and neat against the coming winter, and she had not had to build it alone. She pulled the door shut behind her. It caught clean, the way it was always supposed to.